Finding money to keep New York City's vast network of public housing up and running has always been an iffy proposition. But with thousands of tenants now falling behind in their rent, NYCHA faces a new crisis. Can it be solved? The Point starts right now. Lisa Bova-Hiatt is the interim head of NYCHA, who is facing a new and possibly unanticipated problem: plummeting rent payments that have made it even more difficult to fix the numerous problems facing public housing residents. Thank you very much for joining me. So NYCHA has always faced a difficult time scraping together pennies to maintain its apartment complexes that house nearly 400,000 New Yorkers. But now there's a new problem: the fact that rents have come in a lot lower than they have in the past. Just 65% of the rents were collected last year, 2022, the lowest in the agency's 100-year history. Usually it's over 90%. Why has this happened?
So I really think that the pandemic had a lot to do with our rent arrear problem. It really changed the paradigm. It was really both a health crisis and an economic crisis. And I think the federal government created the ERAP program in order to help states make up the difference in rent arrears. However, the state legislature, the New York State legislature, deprioritized federal housing and subsidized housing. So we're in a situation where we have people who are relying on some assistance, and that assistance never arrived. So what can you do? I mean, here you are left holding the bag of of a deficit that's nearly $500,000. $500 million.
I'm sorry, $500 million. $450 million.
So we are speaking to our federal partners, speaking to our state partners, speaking to our city partners, with the hope that they will be able to provide funding in the form of ERAP or other assistance for our residents.
So we need to explain that that would be money that would help the residents pay
their rent. Exactly.
Because a lot of them, we know during the pandemic, because the city was closed down, they couldn't work, they couldn't earn money. So it wasn't that they, willfully didn't want to pay. They weren't getting income. Exactly.
So what's wonderful about public housing is that your rent is tied to your income. So if people had a decrease in their income, they could apply for an interim recertification. However, what we found was that there were people who did not have a decrease in their income. However, their expenses increased considerably.
Because?
Well, when you think about it, the cost of food, the cost of paying for internet so that their children, which make up a large portion of our population.
The remote learning.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. So if the choice is, do I pay for internet so that my child can attend class or pay my rent, I think a lot of people chose the latter.
So what can you do about this? I mean, and will any tenants face eviction if they can't make the rent?
Well, during the pandemic, I was actually NYCHA's general counsel at the time, and we really took a look at our entire eviction process from beginning to end. And our goal as a public housing authority is to keep people housed, not to evict people. However, we want to make sure that people are also paying their rent, because rent is 1/3 of our operating income. So what we're trying to do is focus on the people with the highest amount of arrears for the longest amount of time. We do not want to evict somebody who's been a public housing resident who has consistently paid their rent. So what we need to do is find other avenues that now may be available to them, like one-shot deals and other avenues where they can find rent assistance.
But at the end of the day, is it possible that some people could face eviction because they haven't been able to pay and they have such a large rent arrears?
Absolutely. I mean, we there will be people who could be evicted. However, those are people who had arrears prior to the pandemic, who are really taking advantage of their housing. People who need assistance, we're happy to help them. During the pandemic, we had a media blitz, signs, rent inserts, everything to try to make sure that residents who had suffered a loss of income filed an interim recertification so we could lower their rent. But we do need our operating money in order to provide services to our residents.
See, that's the biggest question. The biggest question is, what will happen to the agency's ability to fix boilers, repair elevators, leaks, get new stoves, get rid of rats? What will you say to tenants waiting for all these repairs when you have a gap of almost $500 million?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we've asked our CCOP, our tenant association leaders, to really explain to residents why we need this money. But the reality is we've already dipped into our reserves. We have less than a month's rent of reserves left. So it's like paying your monthly bills with your savings account. At some point, there's no savings left. So there could be, although I can't speculate, a slowdown in services. We've spent a tremendous amount of money on all of our pillar programs under our HUD agreement. We're very, very proud of the progress that we've made. But without additional funds, there's going to be a slowdown.
So what does a slowdown mean? Does it mean that instead of taking 2 weeks to fix a leaky roof or a leak coming into the apartment, it could take a month, a year, 6 months? What does a slowdown mean exactly?
I think that's hard to speculate because we don't know how much money we won't be getting in. But it could mean that it would take longer to provide services. And I think this is just an example of the disinvestment in public housing that we've seen across the decades. This isn't an issue that happened overnight, but now we're seeing our buildings are decaying at a much greater rate because of their age. We've replaced boilers, but our distribution systems are really, really struggling. So I think, there will be a slowdown. So it's almost a double hit to our residents.
But does it also mean that you may have to lay off people who do the repairs, who fix the boilers, who, abate the lead, all of that? I mean, because you'll have no money to pay them?
In an extreme situation, that's not off the table. But that is obviously the last thing we would want to do. In our budget this year, we made cuts to our central office, to some of our contracts, and we made sure that our properties, the staff that they have there, that service our residents on a daily basis, was left untouched.
So here's a weird question. Can NYCHA declare bankruptcy?
So anyone can declare bankruptcy. NYCHA could as well.
But would you consider that? And what would be the ramifications?
Well, I don't think we're there yet, but I think when you think about the fact that 1 in 16 New Yorkers lives in New York public housing, that I would hope that our city partners, our state partners, and our federal partners would never let it get to that point.
So are we at the point where you're going to take out your tin cup and go to the mayor, the governor, the federal government and say, hey, listen, we have almost 400,000 people here. They need your help? You know what?
It's something that we're already doing. And we take this very, very seriously. No promises.
Any coins put in the tin cup?
I'm forever hopeful. Again, because NYCHA is really a city within a city. And everyone knows somebody, especially people who work for city, state, and federal government, who live in public housing, not only in New York.
So do you have like a dollar sign, a dollar figure that you're looking for from any of these people who could chip in?
Well, I mean, right now...
do you need the full $450 million?
I would love the full $450 million. I think $250 million would be a great start. I'm also hopeful that the state legislature will be able to reprioritize, and we can find money there.
So we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.